Okay, a very wordy question here. And it's not actually my favourite thing when there's lots of words, lots to read. Luckily, these are questions that are really set as challenges. I think if kids are set questions like this, it can be a little unfair. Because anyway, I mean, I certainly found it hard to read and follow what was going on. Right, well, let's have a go. The latest listening figures for two radio breakfast shows have been released. The number of people listening to Rosie and Jim's Big Breakfast Show has increased by 130% in the last 12 months. The number of people listening to Wake Up with Super Ted and Spotty Breakfast Show has increased by 20% on the last 12 months. Last year, Super Ted and Spotty had 125,000 more listeners than Rosie and Jim, and the total number of listeners to both shows this year is 339,000. And we're asked, how many listeners did Super Ted and Spotty have last year? Okay, so there's quite a lot going on. We've got two different programs, and we've also got a situation. There's a start and an end. There's a 12-month span. So what happens at the beginning, what happens at the end, and different things happening to each program. So it's quite complicated, and possibly then the perfect candidate for a bar model, because you want to be able to figure out what on earth is going on. Okay, so let's pick on some initials to use. I'm going to pick on R and J, and Super Ted and Spotty. So RJSTS. I think it's a small point, but an important one. I think you've got to be able to give things a label. I hate it when there are questions where every person in it has the same initial, for example, and I just think that's being unfair. It's helpful if you can have a simple little label for the elements that you're dealing with. Okay, so what have we got here? The number of people listening to Rosie and Jim's show increased by 130%. What I'm going to do is make a note of that up here, because I know that when I was trying to read it and do it on my scrap bit of paper, I was getting into a muddle over who was 130, and then the other one increased by 20%. And I kept getting it muddled as to one, was it 130 or 120 or what was it and stuff. So you do need to, and that's the whole point of a bar model, isn't it? To clarify all of the information and make sure you capture it all accurately. Okay, so Rosie and Jim's show increased by 130%. Okay, and the Wake Up with Super Ted and Spotty show increased by 20%. And we've also got that Super Ted and Spotty last year had 125,000 more listeners. Now, because I can see that we are increasing in percentages, I am going to make my basic block a block of 10, or a block that I can divide into 10. Okay, I just can see that that's coming, so that's what I'm going to do. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. I think that's 10. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. There we go. Right. And I'm going to just divide this up. And then I need to check down here. Last year, Super Ted and Spotty had 125,000 more listeners than Rosie and Jim. So this one, the Super Ted and Spotty, is going to be the same size plus. Okay, so at first I'm going to draw in a block that's the same. Okay. Okay, and I'm going to add some sort of random block there. That is the extra 125,000. I have no idea how big this is in relation to this. It doesn't matter. What matters is that I know that this represents 125,000, and that I know that all of these parts are equal. Okay, that's the important part. Okay, what else do I know then? So that's that bit of information there. Let's go back to here. The number of people listening to Rosie and Jim has increased by 130% in the last 12 months. Okay, well, what I decided to do, I'm not going to extend this. Because to increase it by 130%, I need one more block like this whole size, so 10 more parts plus 3 more parts. So what I'm going to do is just double up here, okay, to represent that. So that's the 100%. And then we've got the 30%. Okay. So this bit here is the 130%. Okay. What about the second one? We've got Super Ted and Spotty. What happened to Super Ted and Spotty? Well, that increased by 20%. Okay, well, 20%, I could just add it on here. It doesn't really matter. 20% is 2 of these blocks. Okay. I could add it here, 2 blocks there. All right. Or I could add it underneath. It doesn't really matter. It's whatever makes sense to you. Arguably, I should add it here because I did. Let's do it here. So this is 20%. I'm going to add there. So that's 20% of this part. All right. Because there's 10 blocks. 2 blocks here are the 20%. But I also need 20% of this. So I'm going to draw a little block here, and 20% of 125,000 is 25,000. Okay, so that's the 20% of that. All right. Okay. Now what? Well, we're also told, so hang on, I've dealt with that bit of information and I've dealt with that bit of information. We're also told that the total number of listeners to both shows this year, right, so that's after all of these increases, is 339,000. Okay, so that's all of this has a value of 339,000. Well, let's have a look at what constitutes that 339,000. That is all of these equal size parts plus this amount here, which is 125,000 plus 25,000. So I can see that if I, changing colours just for fun, if I start with 339,000, okay, and I subtract these 2 amounts, so 125,000 plus 25,000, that's obviously 150,000, so 150,000. Okay, if I subtract that, it's going to give me the value of all of those parts. So that is 189,000. Okay, so if I take that away and I take that away, I get 189,000. And that is the value of all of these parts. So how many parts do I have? Well, I know that that's 10, so that must be 20. So that's 23, 33, 34, 35. Okay, so if I divide 189,000, divide that by the 35 parts, that gives me 5,400 per part. Okay, so each of these has a value of 5,400. Okay, so far so good. Okay, so now what? I think it's time that we went back to check what we were actually asked to calculate, which was how many listeners did Super Ted and Spotty have last year? So this is Super Ted and Spotty. And this is what they had. This is the bit that was last year, wasn't it? Okay, so that's last year. And that's our question. So that's 10 of these parts that we've just calculated to have a value of 5,400 plus the 125,000. So we want to have, and I'm changing color again. So we've got 5,400 times 10, so 54,000 plus 125,000 equals 179,000. And that is my final answer. Okay, I hope that clarified things and helped.